Back on with the main news this morning. King Charles has called for mutual respect and unity after the riots across Britain. In the first intervention by a monarch since the unrest began, the King has thanked the police and the emergency services for their efforts to restore peace across the country, and he's welcomed how communities have countered the violence.
And all of this comes, of course, after the Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, said that the police should remain on high alert going into the weekend, despite the violence apparently easing. Let's talk to former Scotland Yard detective Peter Bleksley. Morning to you, Peter. I mean, look, you've got a feel for the police officers in this. 6,000 officers sort of on high alert this weekend. I mean, this sort of scale, this level of policing cannot last for long, can it?
Well, that's a very interesting question, because whilst we do have thousands of police officers, some of them many hundreds of miles from their homes, billeted in hotels and other types of accommodation, all on standby and incurring an enormous overtime bill, which the Home Office said they're going to pick up that bill. It does beg the question, doesn't it? There's been, for so many years, we have senior police officers saying we're free of politics. Politics doesn't affect our policing. We are truly independent. Well, out of necessity, we've seen that policing very much is affected by the politics, because the Prime Minister has been all over these operations in recent days. Therefore, it begs the question, if the politicians, if the police can mobilise to quell, to stop the dreadful rioting that we've seen, when the dust settles on all of this, will they have the same resolve to tackle shoplifting, knife crime, and many of the other horrendous crimes that blight our nation?
Which suggests, because lots of people are asking that question, it suggests that we've been too soft on crime generally for far too long.
The police service themselves, due to their highly educated leaders who all went off to university to get letters after their names and came back to policing with their heads full of complete and utter hogwash, which was largely irrelevant to policing, allowed it to become a social service, in so much as that they dealt with people in crisis, people in mental health issues, people with alcoholism, and a raft of other stuff that is not policing. What they have shown recently, and I commend them for that, is that when they want to tackle crime, they absolutely can do that. And so can the courts, so can the CPS. So I ask the question, why haven't we had that strength, that political will for years? And why have the police and the establishment allowed so much crime to be carried out unchecked, unsolved, and not even investigated a lot of the time?
I mean, I suppose the argument would be, Peter, resources. There's just not been enough money to do all that should be done, and therefore they've prioritised on what they think is urgent.
Well, I think the tide of teenage bloodshed that flows through so many of our cities and has cost hundreds and hundreds of teenage lives is more than enough of a reason to mobilise like they have done, to show the will, the determination to do something about that. But they haven't up until now, together with shoplifting, which has turned most of our high streets into lawless hellholes. If they can do this, they can do that, and the sooner the better.
But Peter, I hate to say it, because it's like we're going back 10 years. It's down to, a lot of that's down to Bobby's on the beat, isn't it?
Which, of course, we haven't had in recent times. But we've got 6,000, let me just say that again, 6,000 kitted up, ready to go. When they want to do it, they can do it. When their political masters tell them to do it, they do it. So it's about time they connected with the every man and every woman in the street, not cherry-picking their little communities as to who they're going to go and dance with and who they're going to go and break bread with. They need to be there for everybody, because once all this is over, if those other problems have not been addressed, or they don't seem to be being addressed properly, the trust and confidence in the police, once again, will be on the floor.
We all know that politicians play with figures to try and impress you. 20,000 policemen being taken on, and then you discover they're only replacing the 20,000 that have already left or leaving. Things like that. But very clearly, we need more police. We need more money put into policing, don't we? How do you get the politicians to understand when hopefully this crisis fades? Will they remember?
Well, let's face it, senior police chiefs have taken enough trips and done enough Zoom meetings with Downing Street in the last couple of weeks that their voices must clearly have been heard. It is incumbent upon those police chiefs to remember what the core basics of policing are, which is to protect life and property, to prevent crime, and to investigate it when it does take place. They can do it. They are doing it. They need to do it in the future. If not, they'll be in the same position that they were before these riots, when trust and confidence was negligent, when people didn't respect them. They've got a chance here. They've got an opportunity, and they and the politicians need to grasp it.
Peter, good to see you. Thank you. I have to say, I think a lot of it falls down to Bobby's on the beat, and I haven't been bleating on about that forever and a day. But it makes a difference. I mean, when Peter was talking about knife crime and shoplifting, if you've got bobbies walking up and down the high street and things, it does make a difference. It alters your behaviour a little bit.
But also, don't you think the speeding up the whole court process, hauling these people in, these horrible people, and I'm glad they're showing their faces and they're naming them, and they are... one of the people that it might even have been Peter, one of the people we interviewed few weeks ago said, if we could haul these people up into court, get them to stand in the dock and face the consequences of what they did in the rioting, for instance, he said they will weep in the dock, because they do. Because once they're in the dock, they become cowards, and they start crying. Grown men will cry in the dock. And it's happened, hasn't it? He was right. These people, I'm really glad that we're naming and shaming them. It sounds crude, but that's what's happening. But the speed at which this is now happening is very impressive.
Well,
Why can't that happen more often?
Well, it is, except for... we're not covering it, because I haven't got the figures, but I bet a whole load of cases have been pushed back onto the back burner that are now going to have to be caught up on. So we haven't got the resources,
We're talking
actually.
about 24-hour courts or 7-day-week courts. Why don't we have 7-day-week courts anyway? Why don't courts shut down on Saturdays and Sundays?
For magistrates' courts, which is what most of this is, then it's a fair point. Magistrates are volunteers, but you should be able to get people who will volunteer to do on social hours and all that sort of thing.
And I'm sure they have, just presently. And what do you think of the King getting involved? I wonder what you think at home.
I've got so much respect for the King.
But should he have said anything?
No.
I know. I'm.
No, I think...
It's very unusual to have the monarch say anything about this sort of problem.
I mean, look, he's calling for mutual respect and unity, fine. But he's also sort of mentioned the thuggery side of it all. And it's not that it's wrong to condemn it, because it isn't. It's just, I don't know if... it's so bordering on the political.
Exactly. He's beginning to sound like a politician. And what worries me, it worries us all anyway, is that hopefully there will be no more violence and thuggery, but there could be. And it's sort of him calling upon his people to behave better. And then if they don't, they've sort of rejected the King as well. I don't know. I'm uncomfortable about it. I wonder what you think at home. Should he have said anything? I can understand him being moved to, but I don't know whether he should have got involved. The Queen Elizabeth wouldn't have. Wouldn't have
done, no. And he's also said, praising the communities for countering the violence. And again, I don't know if that's... The problem with that is that it makes it sound like those communities who are all talking about immigration are right, and those communities who are concerned about immigration, might not be anti-immigration, but concerned about uncontrolled immigration, are wrong. And it's a fine line, and it's a difficult one, but I would think he would have been better advised to stay out of it.
Yeah.
And especially when, of course, you had that anti-protest a couple of days ago, where that, of course, one person, that Labour councillor, former Labour councillor, was arrested and has now been charged.
That's why it's a very complicated mix for the King to get involved in, isn't it? He doesn't want it to look as though he's taking a side. Of course, he's not at the moment, but
it's a fine line.
It's a very fine line. Should he have got involved? Get in touch. Tell us what you think.